that to me is like an interesting space or an interesting need to solve for. And with AI, it's become even more accessible and easier to bring together siloed data and smart workflows in one centralized intelligent system that is easy to use.
This is Girl Take Note, a podcast for women who are looking to turn their dreams into reality. Do you want to start your podcast, but you're worried about the costs? Well, I've got the perfect solution for you. I'm Shawnee Sanders. I'm from the Girl Take Note podcast, and I'm here today to tell you all about my podcast starter kit, only available on my Amazon storefront. This kit has everything you need to get started, from headphones to microphones to audio interfaces, all under $500. It is one of the most affordable kits to help you get started with your podcast's dreams today. So don't wait. Go ahead and grab yours now. Click the link in the description below and start shopping, and happy podcasting. All right, Imane, welcome to Girl Take Note. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. How are you?
I am great. Thank you so much for being on the show. Excited to have you on for this Trailblazing Women series. Think you've done so many great things and blazed your own trail in many ways that we get to talk about here today. But before we jump into anything, you know, your career has been inspiring. Right? You went from a cancer research scientist to media and entertainment. Can you kind of tell us what was that pivotal moment that made you decide to go from cancer research scientist and jump over into entrepreneurship and media and advocate for women?
Yeah, definitely. I think, I won't lie and say that it was all planned out and there was a very specific moment that really led me to take the leap of faith. I think it was all kind of a trial and error type of journey. And that's really how I think I approach most of my career moves and most also of my life. It's all about trying as many things as you want or as you're interested in, and then figuring out whether it's for you or not, and then figuring out again what's your next move. So for me, obviously, I grew up always wanting to be a doctor of some sort, or at least go to medical school. And, I started doing that. Actually, I went to school for biochemistry and molecular biology. Then I did actually go on medical missions around the world where I took a more hands-on approach to the career I thought I wanted. And it was extremely fulfilling. It was amazing. And I'm so grateful for that experience because it has opened my eyes into a whole new kind of horizon that was all about philanthropy, giving back, and making sure that, you are operating from a place of purpose. And that ultimately the work that you do and invest time and effort in is somewhat rewarding and fulfilling as well. And so medical missions were that for me. I just didn't see myself doing it as a career. I'm a very sensitive person, as I've come to learn more and more. The more I, got into the field, the more sensitive I became. I was very much attached to patients, and I got sentimental, I got emotional easily. So I knew that ultimately being a practicing doctor is probably not the best career path for me, but I still wanted to be involved somehow in the field. So that's when I made the decision to, again, pivot from going to medical school to more of grad school around R&D, and specifically focused on cancer research. To me, that was very a near and dear cause to my heart because I had someone actually pass away because of breast cancer. And so I kind of made a commitment that I would one day be involved in that kind of research. And it's a great field. As you know, there's a lot there's a lot of innovation there. There's a lot to be found. And so I went on to lead a startup's clinical trials and preclinical trials in cancer research, specifically focused on melanoma and carcinoma. And then I moved to New York and became more involved in the art and the comms and storytelling, advocacy relations, public relations, investor relations side of biotech, which kind of was my first time dipping my toes in the content marketing space, if you will.
Yeah.
And I really loved that side of the industry because it allowed me to help tell stories because of my scientific background and be the middle woman between, big biotech companies, big pharma companies, and then the public who doesn't have that scientific background and knowledge. And I really loved that. And I thought that was an interesting kind of take on the industry. And that's kind of my first I would say, experience around content, communications, marketing. Before that, I was fully scientist. I was very scientific driven. I wasn't much about kind of, content and marketing and storytelling. And I really fell in love with that process. And so ultimately, that's when my career started changing, because I was also doing some pageants on the side, which was really for me an interesting take, because my mom pushed me to I would say, how does she put it? To explore my feminine side. Because I got too comfortable being a tomboy growing up. I have a brother. And so she was you're my only daughter. Why don't you go outside your comfort zone a little bit and explore pageants? One, it's great competitive, hobby, because I played tennis and I got injured. And so I kind of just lost that competitive hobby on the side. And then two, she's like, that's great for pushing yourself outside your comfort zone, do something you're not comfortable with and see where it leads you. And three, it's a great, interesting take on, femininity and just exploring yourself again, getting to know yourself again. And she was right. I didn't know what to expect with pageants. It was very much an interesting path for me that I never thought I would ever even try, because, again, I wasn't a girly girl growing up. But then I fell in love with the process. It was more of a boot camp for me to really understand how to sell myself better, practice discipline, get to know myself and improve myself from a physical, emotional, psychological perspective. And again, it was almost a pre-training to what the real world would be like, because with pageants, you need to be your best. You're competing with the best of the best. And it's not about beauty. Of course, everyone in that room that you're competing against is gorgeous in some capacity. It's very obvious. But again, the way you stand out is how do you carry yourself, your confidence, your poise, who you are and what you bring to the table, and how you can sell that to judges in under 2 minutes. And so that was a great thing for me to learn, and because they don't teach you this in school. And especially as scientist, I was very much used to being behind the scenes in a lab all day long, doing repetitive experiments. Really, there's not much interaction with people. It was me and my notebook and my lab coat and just the lab. So that was a different world for me. And I loved it. I fell in love with it. And ultimately, I think because of that platform, and I ended up winning Miss New York in 2015, I finally found a voice for myself, which I didn't think or knew I had before. And because of that platform, I kind of was almost thrown into this entrepreneurial path, because I felt a responsibility to be that change agent, and also to use my voice, my platform at that point, to inspire other women to get on paths that are unconventional, and also really kind of explore their own interests and not feel like they are tied down to one lane that they've picked years ago. And so ultimately, that's how I ended up in that side of the spectrum, around going from science and cancer research all the way to entrepreneurship and women's advocacy. I think it was more of an inspiration based on my own journey. And I felt like it was time for me to give back somehow. And the way I did was, again, launching my first podcast at that point. I'm like, okay, wait, I have a voice now. This was, again, popular podcast where everybody now is able to have a podcast. I felt like there weren't many women's voices in that space, and there weren't enough women's stories told in the media. And I somehow thought that I was the one to change that, And so I took a chance on it and then launched a podcast, which took off really quickly. And I think that really validated, again, the need that I saw and the white space I was trying to fill. And then that ultimately evolved to become a full-on media brand called Swaay, which was all about being a publishing platform that empowered underrepresented voices to tell their stories, and also provided that support they needed as far as content creation and content strategy.
Yeah, I was going to say that about Swaay. It looked like you was able to identify like a gap in the media landscape when you launched Swaay. Like you said, you feel like it wasn't a lot of women voices at that time with podcasting, and you were able to identify something that was able to really fill that gap. And can you share maybe some of the initial challenges you faced when you was creating the platform?
Yes. I mean, a lot of challenges. I think we were, at the time, I didn't really understand how challenging and difficult the industry of media is to really stand out, right? To have a profitable business, a sustainable business, you needed to compete with the clickbaity platforms, the platforms that were obviously raising tons of money, like they were tech companies, and spending so much on advertising, spending so much on audience acquisition. And we were the small little fish, you know? So that was one challenge, obviously, we had to figure out how to work around. So my immediate thought was, okay, let me go to raise money as well, you know, because if they can do it, then I can do it. And also, I think for me, I just knew that it was the right time to focus on an initiative like this, because I couldn't have predicted the right timing either. But this was right before the Me Too movement, the Time's Up, the women's movement, and the whole kind of rise around social issues. And so it was almost the right time to really have a mission-driven media brand that was more than just, another fashion magazine or lifestyle magazine for women, which I think you and I agree on that that's always been the focus when it comes to women's media brands. So we're very much focused on the aesthetic, the looks and the beauty and the fashion and the lifestyle versus actually creating content that was extremely substantive for women. And so my thought was, okay, let me bring together like a Forbes meets Vogue, right? Like how can we create a very aesthetically pleasing magazine that it makes you want to read it, kind of like what a Vogue looks like. You know, it's just very more about aesthetic and visuals and editorial feel. But then the content has to be interesting and substantive and doesn't focus on women's looks or fashion tips or dating tips or sex tips, but rather like your tips and stories around resilience, strength, failure, success, and taking an unconventional path to really find yourself as a woman and what it means to be a woman in today's society. So that was our take on the white space that I definitely felt like everybody as women could agree on, but it was very hard to break through at the early stages because you're competing again with companies that have substantial funding and big brands. And so for us, raising money at the beginning was easier when it comes to finding investors that were more strategic, right? So women or other men, high net worth people that believed in the mission and really believed in the existence of the white space. But again, I think there came a time where we hit a ceiling as far as how much more can we raise, and then our positioning in the landscape. But at that point, I've accepted who we were, more of like an indie brand, a smaller brand that really was mission driven, and that we would try to make that impact one step at a time without having to kind of shoot for the stars right away. And ultimately, I do think we came out on top by building a brand that really stood for something. So at least I'm very proud of that. We had our difficulties, of course, as far as figuring out the right business model for it, sustaining ourselves for a bit. But ultimately, I think from a brand perspective and from an impact perspective, we ended up building a platform where a lot of women felt more comfortable sharing their stories and felt proud to take that step forward and being like, okay, yeah, I actually have a story worth telling and I have the right support system to be able to do so. And I have the right platform to distribute that, which I don't think we all felt for years. You know, like I know when I wanted to share my story initially, I'm like, who wants to listen to me? Which media brand wants to even write about me? Why do I even matter? Does anything have to say even have some kind of impact? Like, does my story even matter? So a lot of these questions, I feel like we were able to really strip away for many women who were ready for that step to actually like put themselves out there.
Yeah. You know, throughout when I'm listening to your journey, and it seems like, because I talked to a lot of entrepreneurs about confidence, you know, which is really huge when it comes to going into entrepreneurship, selling yourself. And it seems like, I guess, throughout your pageant days, or you could just tell me, you know, when you feel like you really built up confidence to say, you know what, I can do this. I can make this happen. It's just a type of delusional confidence that I know a lot of entrepreneurs have, where it's like, you have to believe in yourself so much that it's beyond what everyone else believes, that you got to have that type of confidence.
Yeah. And I think, look, I feel that confidence is always going to be a work in progress. I don't think anyone's ever going to walk this earth saying, I have no moments of doubt at all, and that I think I'm 24/7. That would be inhuman, if you will. But I do think that what drives a lot of my confidence, at least, and I can speak just from my experience, because I do think it's probably different for everyone, is really finding my passion and something that almost keeps me up at night to a point where I'm like, I don't have a choice. Like, even if I'm scared, I have to do it scared. And that's honestly the common denominator between everything as far as my career goes and where I draw my confidence to be able to move forward. I mean, even just now where I'm at in my career, I'm in a whole new field again, as per usual. I always find myself in new situations where I'm like, wait, I'm a fast learner, so I'm not worried about that. But then just being able to go out there and act like you have known this all your life and that you're the expert and that like you're here to take your spot in the forefront of an industry. It's tough because you're like, imposter syndrome can creep up on you all the time. But I just know going to sleep every day and waking up every morning that this is where I'm meant to be and that I am called to find the courage, the confidence somehow to step up into these shoes and carry my mission. And so that's why I think when it comes to something you're super passionate about and excited about, it's okay to be delusional because that delusion is coming from somewhere. You know that there is something in you that believes that you're able to carry this mission, even if you're going to do it scared at the beginning, and then you're going to kind of you're going to walk into that confidence slowly but surely. I think for me, the biggest driver of confidence is going out there and doing it. It's getting started and then getting that experience. Experience drives confidence. When you have experience, I mean, not just success, like when you have failed a lot as well, you can go out there and say, I failed so much that I have learned way more than the average person because I went out there and actually was in the trenches and did it. And here's what I learned from experience. And that experience makes me confident to move forward in a way that has more, in a way that I know I have more insights for my decision making. And I know I have more confidence because I have failed and I know how to do it better moving forward. So I think, again, experience in the sense of success, trial and error, and failure actually is the biggest driver for me when it comes to confidence.
Yeah, I agree with that. Your failures do help you, gave you so much insight. It does make you confident to kind of continue on. I want to talk about Vocable and the idea of Vocable and how it all came about. Because with all your background, like you say, you loved content when you did it for those big companies and stuff like that. So did that love for content creation and strategy help you launch Vocable?
Yes. So I think Vocable has been in the concept of it has been in my mind for a few years now, prior to even AI being a huge thing over the past couple of years. And I think what really makes us different and me and my approach with this is not my love for the content itself. Like, I don't consider myself a content creator. It's more my obsession over processes. I think your content is going to be only as good as your operations and your content process and how sustainable and scalable it is over time. And so that's, I think, what I learned the most when I worked with bigger companies back in my early stages of my career, because they have to be very process driven in order to really kind of tame the chaos and make sure that, and if they bring more people on the team, or if they scale their content, or if they branch out into new channels, then it's not chaotic. Then they already have a framework that they can work off of to be able to carry on those scalable moves without losing control over the operations. And so to me, I'm very process driven and I love that. I think, again, in business in general, and maybe even in life, structure and processes are very important to be successful. Yeah. And I do know that when it comes to content marketing, because of how overwhelming it's become and the growing demands from consumers, it's only going to get messier and messier. And especially for the under-resourced businesses who don't have the budget to outsource all that chaos to an agency and let them deal with it. And, businesses who don't have the budgets to hire a content team to be able to handle every step of the content lifecycle and make sure things are moving flowing way across the entire lifecycle.
Yes.
And of course, businesses who rely heavily on content to drive revenue, but again, don't have the expertise and skills to set the right process in place for that. So that to me is like an interesting space or an interesting need to solve for. And with AI, it's become even more accessible and easier to bring together siloed data and smart workflows in a one centralized intelligent system that is easy to use for the average business person, without having to be a big enterprise that pays for, enterprise grade software. And that really is where I want Vocable to focus on, at least for the very first phase of it, is helping under-resourced business owners, SMBs, to really centralize and streamline their content processes using AI. So again, yes, content creation is part of it, but I think all the other tools right now that I'm seeing pop in this landscape that also make it a very saturated one are platforms and tools that mostly focus on the content creation aspect of it, which to me is just one piece of the puzzle. But if you take a step back and look at your content process holistically, there is strategy, there is planning, there is execution, there is performance, there is iteration. So there's quite a few layers to it. And the big question is, how do we create a connective tissue between all of these layers without having to spend so much time and tedious tasks and repetitive tasks to move one piece of content through the entire workflow? And I think AI is really good at reinventing the way we approach this operation.
Yeah. That's what really stood out to me when I saw you on the stage at Mind Valley doing that conference. And when you talked about the different steps of the content process, and it just was so mind blowing to me because I thought about the way I produce my own content. And I was like, you know what? I'm not even thinking about it in that manner in which you laid it out. And it was so clear, it was so easy to digest, so easy to understand. And then when I read directly over to Vocable when you talked about it, and it was like, oh my God, I put in this prompt about what I want. I answered these few things, and it gave me an entire campaign from email to social to YouTube. It just created everything for me, where normally I would create these things in different apps. You know what I mean? Other systems and stuff like that, where it did it all in one. And I was just like, and I told everybody about it because I'm a big fan of Vocable. So I told everyone about it because I feel like you really do need to have more of a strategy and more of a process in place when it comes to just creating content if you're looking to build something sustainable.
Correct.
And so this really did help me a lot. That's why I was like, oh my God, I have her on a show because I love Vocable. I want to talk about it. I want to tell us the process behind it. And it's so amazing to have you on here and to talk about it because it's such a great system. I love it. I really do.
And that's great that you mentioned that because you're not the only one, by the way. I think everyone gets to a point where they realize, wait, I am just creating content on the fly, right? Like last minute, it's like, oh wait, what am I creating this week? Or who do I interview on a podcast in the next week or so? So very few people actually are in the habit of being 3 months ahead, 2 months ahead of their content game, so that they can just set the operation in motion and then almost set it and forget it, right? And that's when you're like operating from a place of alignment with your KPIs and brand, and then you've taken your time to strategize and plan accordingly. You've put the pieces in place, and now you're ready to just put it all in motion and deploy it. And that's how, it's funny, that's how most other processes within companies and businesses work, like when you're building a product, you're not building a feature the week of, you have to take a step back, you have to do a product roadmap, you have to figure out the steps that go into the feature development, you have to test it first, then deploy it, and then monitor it. So there's every single major process within companies and businesses have its own workflow. And I do think that probably content departments and content marketing is one of the most outdated processes right now. And even though AI has been so impactful when it comes to content creation, now you can create like copy on the fly. People are still not thinking about AI. Okay, how do I use AI for more than just the creation part? Like, I want to actually be able to ideate campaigns. I want to be able to plan and outline every piece of content ahead of time with its own brief, with its own structure, do my research ahead of it, see what people are talking about, integrate that into my content, and then figure out again what each workflow for each piece of content is, so that I don't have to do it the day of or the week of. And again, that's not scalable. So Content operations is always good when you're talking about, okay, I'm ready to scale. And scale means I want to create more content in one category or one channel, or I want to branch out into more channels. So let's say you only had a blog and social media, now you want to launch a podcast, or you had a podcast and a blog, now you want to do a YouTube channel and a webinar channel, and then you want to have an email campaign. There are so many channels now that are needed for a very successful content marketing approach, but you can't scale across all of those channels unless you have a very clear process in place that is able to take you from one step of the workflow until the end without having to constantly feel like you need to do repetitive and admin tasks, because ultimately that's what burns people out, right? It's like copying and pasting between different softwares and tools, collaborating on Slack, sending emails, putting together floating spreadsheets, figuring out which brief goes to which document and content is just a mess. So you can't scale that way, right? So at that point, you're like, I give up. And that's ultimately what we want to solve. It's more about scalability and sustainability versus just content creation.
Yeah, I love it. It's like I said, I'm a huge fan of it. And so I use it constantly. I want to jump into the new thing that you're doing, this new arena of being an author, with your book. It's your first book, if I'm not mistaken, The Glass Ledge. And I kind of wanted to get your thoughts behind what was the driving force behind this book, and was becoming an author something you always see yourself doing?
I think we all have that dream at some point, right? Where I want to write a book one day. And that's exactly how I thought of it. And I remember this very vividly back in right before I got a job in cancer research. I was a little bit lost in my journey again. And I have these moments a lot where I'm just like, what's next? Like, what am I going to do next? And at that point, I remember I'm like, I kind of want to write a book, right? But then I didn't know about what. And also, I think when you think about writing a book, you want to feel like you have a story to tell. And at that point, I was just getting started with my career. So unless I was writing fiction, I didn't know at the time what would that book be about. So I shelved that dream, and then I never really thought about it again, to be honest, because I had so much more on my plate moving forward. And I will say I was one of the very lucky ones because of the groundwork I've put in as far as putting my story out there, to a point where I was approached by an amazing agent that read about me on Forbes. I remember this was an article that came out on Forbes in 2018 about me. And she read that and she reached out to me saying, hey, I loved your story. Have you ever thought about writing a book? And at that point, you're like, is this a scam? Like, what's going on? Like, why me? Like, what do you mean? Like, I'm not that cool. So you get, again, the imposter syndrome kicks in. And I just kind of like shelved it. I'm like, I don't know. Then she ends up like reaching out and really wanting to talk about it a lot deeper and really explain to me what is the process of writing a book. So we were in touch actually for a couple of years before I finally decided that I wanted to move forward with it and that I was ready for it, because you want to be ready for the book writing process. It's not easy. And also you want to be very excited about the topic. And I think at that point when she reached out to me, this was 2018. So we were still, I think, on the brink of the whole women's movement in a way. And being a media company myself, I was sent a lot of books. Every time one came out, we had it on our desk. And so it almost felt like, oh, everyone and their moms are writing books these days. Like, if I'm going to do it, I really want to feel like I have a different approach and angle. I don't want to write about the same thing. I don't want to regurgitate and repeat what's already out there. I need to have a different message, and I need that message to be a little bit more driven by my own experience, again, that I could speak to it so freely and passionately. And that's why it took me a couple of years to finally agree. In 2020, right before the pandemic hit, we agreed and we we did not sell the book, but we started putting together the proposal for it. We sold the book in August 2020. So it was perfect timing as well for me, because I was taking a step back at that point. Everyone was. The whole world was on pause in a way. And all I had was time to write. And so ultimately, I decided on the topic around self-imposed, basically barriers, instead of really focusing on the external barriers that we've heard so much about. And there are statistics around it, right? So the pay gap and just sexual harassment, everything that women have to face on a day-to-day basis almost when it comes to stepping into their careers. We've heard that narrative, and I felt like for me, my experience with it is that even though it was important to acknowledge, sometimes I internalized it a lot more than I should, and it became my narrative that as a woman, I can't do XYZ. And so then I started realizing that I was actually setting these barriers even more on myself. And that I was prohibiting myself from actually taking steps outside my comfort zone just because I justified it by the statistics out there. For example, only 2% of women raise VC capital, so I would never be able to do that. So I wouldn't even try at some point. I stopped even trying to go for it because I'm like, well, stats show that I can't do it, so why even bother? And that's when I realized these narratives, although are important to shine the light on, sometimes as women, we've started playing the victim a lot more than we need. And that's when it becomes way more dangerous than having to fight external barriers, is when you don't know that you're setting internal barriers that are actually being more dangerous for your career, for your progress, for your success, than the external barriers that we think we need to fight. And ultimately, I came up with the glass ledge as a metaphor because we're very familiar with the glass ceiling, right? So the glass ledge for me really represented this kind of very shaky ground that we're standing on, because it all comes from within. And then if we don't shatter that, then, we're not going to be able to actually move forward in our careers. So that's ultimately how the book story unfolded. And again, it's been a great experience because that's one other way and one other outlet for my story to make the impact it needs to. But I was very lucky in the process to have the right support system.
Yeah, I think that is so real when it comes to our own ways of self-sabotaging ourselves, because we feel like as women, I saw this, I was on a Fireside chat where I used to work in tech myself. And so our director of product did a Fireside chat and talked about how the disparity between men and women when it comes to even applying for jobs as women, that we will see a job description and might not have the majority, or we'll have the majority of the skills that they're looking for, but it'll be just a few things that we don't have. And so we won't even apply. Yeah. But then a man will come and see the same position and only have maybe one or two of the skills things or the descriptions that they're looking for, and they would apply. And I found that to be so astonishing because I'm like, I know as myself, I've done that before too. I've seen things out there that when I was looking for jobs and saying to myself, oh, but I can't do these two things, so I'm not even going to apply for it. And so it is that self-sabotage thing, that internal thing where we judge ourselves and where we feel like we're not good enough for certain things. And so to have your book that address those kind of things and identify that for us, I think is absolutely amazing, because we need to work more on that as women, to know that we are worthy and we are confident enough to step up in our positions, right? And be seen in the room and be heard, and to also have the same thing as men have.
Exactly. Yep. And to me, I say that to myself too. And is to be patient with yourself. I think a lot of it is just conditional programming, and right away your mind goes into protection mode. It's almost like a defense mechanism that it's like your ego protecting you from getting hurt and getting rejected. Yeah. But ultimately for me, I'm like, I'd rather be delusional than self-sabotage. So it's like, okay, the more I think I can't do it, the more I want to do it. And I've become, I've conditioned myself to think that way now more than the old way of thinking. So it's really a practice. And if anything, you just got to be very aware of the internal talk that's happening in your head, and then acknowledge that, and then right away mitigate it and make sure that you're not being pulled and led by your old programming, but rather you're taking that as an opportunity to reprogram your own internal talk, your own conditioning. And it gets easier the more you do it. The more you get rejected, the easier it becomes. Now I don't get fazed by an email rejection or any kind of rejection. It's kind of, for me, a part of the process, because the quicker you get rejected, the quicker you'll get that yes. And so most people have to go through a few rounds of rejections before they get to their, preferred and ideal outcome. And so to me, I think of it as like, the quicker I get this over with, the quicker I'll get to where I need to be. So versus most people kind of see it as like, oh, I can't look at this email, it might be a rejection, or I can't open this letter, rejection. It's like,
Yeah.
I need to know, because the quicker I'll know,
Yeah.
then I'll know what to do next so that I can get to where I need to be. You know, it's almost like taking a wrong turn. You don't want to keep taking wrong turns after. That's only going to delay your process to get to your destination. You just want to know exactly when that wrong turn is coming up and be like, oh, okay, that's wrong. Let me just keep going until I find that, you know, the right turn to make, or just get to my destination a lot quicker. So it's all about programming, and it gets easier as we practice it more and more.
Yeah. You know, I want to talk about balance because you're such a busy person. You have so much going on. What does balance look like for you in your life? And also, I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs, and a lot of us want to prioritize self-care, you know, because we need those kind of digital detox days, those mental health breaks. So what are some of your self-care things that you do for yourself just to recharge and revitalize yourself?
Yeah. And that's a very important question, because I think you can't, you know, pour from an empty cup. And so I think and especially as women, we always want to give all the
Yeah.
time across all different sides of our lives, you know, from personal to professional to family. And sometimes we don't really think about how that's affecting us mentally, and that the more it's affecting us, the less we can actually give the quality care and the quality work that we're looking to do. So for me, I think the best way to describe balance sometimes is contrast. I think there are days and weeks and sometimes even months where I just need to be on the go, go, go. And I accept that. You know I can't take time to go to the spa, and I can't take time to go hang out with my family as much as I would like to. But then, as long as I make sure that there is a moment of contrast following that, then I feel a lot better about it. For example, I would, last year was very heavy on traveling for me. So I would travel for 2 months straight, and then I would come home. And for a month, I'm just doing things for me. I'm doing less work, less meetings, less calls, and I'm kind of going to the beach. I'm working out a lot more. I'm spending more time with family. So I basically make sure that everything all the time I've spent being on the go and working hard on work, I'm also balancing it out, contrasting it out with working hard on myself and my personal life as well. And sometimes, when I'm able to have the balance throughout the days, I'm very strict, at least these days I try to be, when it comes to setting time on my calendar for my own routine. So I have a morning routine and a night routine that I try to stay with as much as possible. And now I'm even including a midday routine as much as I can, when I don't have 2 busy days, where I can actually take time during the lunch break to eat without being in front of my laptop. Just little things like that. Take a 15-minute break, breathing work or meditating to just reset and ground myself again. Maybe call my parents and check on them during the day. Just kind of rewire my brain a little bit from that screen time and that being like in the zone, in work mode. So, there are two folds to it. There are the little things that you think don't matter, but they do, like that you can do throughout the day, and they don't take a lot of your time if you're really disciplined and make sure that you are saying that this is as important as my investor meeting next hour, or as my product meeting this morning, as I have to take this at 1 hour to eat lunch by myself without having to speak to people, to meditate, to do XYZ, whatever brings you joy. Sometimes I would even go for a swim in my pool. And then there are the bigger things, like, okay, the next month I'm going to do less work on my business and more work on myself. And so I guarantee you also, the more you think about working on yourself as much as you work on your business, the more rewards you will see on your business as well. And that's going to give you more excitement and motivation to really put yourself first and worry and feel less bad about it. I think that is probably the biggest struggle for me, is that I used to have what we call pleasure guilt, is when I'm on vacation or I'm taking time off. I have so much guilt I struggle with, because I think, oh, I need to be doing something productive right now. I need to be like answering emails, or I need to be doing research for product, or I need to be coming up with ideas. Like, I'm always putting myself in that like moment of pressure that I shouldn't take time off until I hit like my huge $100 million goal. And I'm sure that when I do hit that $100 million goal, I'm like, I'm not going to rest until I hit like $1 billion goal. So that's the thing, is like, you need to realize that it will never stop. So you got to just put an end to that early on. Otherwise you will struggle with that guilt that will almost take the joy of life out of you. I remember with my first business, Swaay, there was a point where I'm like, what is the point of all of this? Like, I don't
Yeah.
even enjoy the little things anymore. Like, I would go to hang out with my family and I'd be like, I feel nothing. Like, I should be like excited, you know? Like, it
Yeah.
was just a weird realization, but I'm glad I went through that because that reset me, and that's also what put me now even more on a spiritual path. I think the deeper I get into tech and business, the more
Mhm.
spiritual I become, because you need to strike that balance. Otherwise, it'll get to a point where you just hit crazy amount of burnout and you almost lose the passion you have for what you do. And that's ultimately
Yeah.
what you don't want.
Exactly. Exactly. Man, this has been such a good conversation. And I'm gonna close it out. Because I want to know one more thing. I was going to ask you this question too before. It was like, how do you define success, and do you believe you've gotten there yet? And you said I got the $100 million goal. The next thing it's going to be $1 billion goal. But still, if you can answer the question, and also what's next? I know you have the new book and you're promoting that, but what's next for you that you're getting excited about?
You know, I think going back to success, for me, it's not
Yeah.
anymore about a number, a dollar number or anything. That's obviously more of a business, kind
Yeah.
of shoot for the moon and you land in the stars. But I've learned to really redefine success for me about freedom and really, and I think
Mm-hmm.
I've honestly, if I were to die tomorrow, I feel like I'm there as far as that definition goes.
Mm-hmm.
I've always been the type of person that wants to have a career where I have so much freedom in the sense that I can ideate, I can execute, I can, create, I can really be excited about like what else can we do versus having more restrictions around what I'm able to bring to the table, which to me
Yeah.
was kind of my experience in corporate America. Is obviously you
Mm-hmm.
can have so many ideas, you can have great execution style, but there's always that hierarchy, that kind of
Mm-hmm.
process you have to go through to get anything approved, and you can't really go and execute on. Tomorrow I wake up and have an idea, I'm like, okay, let's do it, I think it's great, let's
Yeah.
go. And I love that.
Yeah.
That's what excites me. And to me, I wanted that as part of what my career entailed. And I feel like that's success for me right now. Same thing with my
Mm-hmm.
personal life. Like I have the opportunity and freedom to travel wherever I want to work from wherever I want, to spend more time with family while also like catering to my business. And ultimately, that kind of freedom is really important to me because that keeps me again balanced, and that
Yes.
keeps me more driven and excited to be able to do more without feeling like, oh, it's work. And so that it's more about a feeling and feeling like I have that kind of freedom and liberty to live life the way I want to live life, because I
Yeah.
can take a whole week off if I want to. Now I don't do that, but that's because I'm actually excited about what I do. And so that's
Yeah.
what you want to be, in that space where you don't feel like you need to and you have to work and you're dreading it. It's like I do it because I love it and I want to. And that's all,
Yeah.
honestly, for me, that's what success is. And of course, the other layer to success is having something or working on something that you can see is somewhat impactful, whether it's
Mm-hmm.
for a set group of people, for the world, just so okay, this matters. And I feel excited to hear people um, be grateful that I'm working on something that is helping them.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be like, oh my God, I'm changing the world, right? Or I'm curing cancer, which I wanted to do
Yeah.
at the beginning. But it could be small things where you feel like, wow, I get the gratitude and I get the fulfillment to see people saying, thanks for creating this and it helped me in such way.
Oh
So
yeah.
that to me is true success, is being able to feel like my work actually matters at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I think that answered your question. I think there was a second part to it.
Yeah. What's next for you?
What's
What are you
next for
excited
me?
about? Yeah.
I don't know. I think for so long I've always felt the need to know what's next, right? And
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
think the way I lived the past couple of years, after going through such a big transition in 2022 and kind of hitting a
Mm-hmm.
reset button,
Mm-hmm.
for everything that I thought I wanted, that I built for myself, I ended up moving away from that and starting
Mm-hmm.
over. And at that point, I was kind of like, Jesus, take the wheel. I have
Yes.
no idea what's going to come.
Yeah.
And I will say I'm pleasantly surprised by how things unfolded on their own. And I couldn't have honestly predicted this or planned this any better. So now
Mm.
I am really operating from a place of letting go. And actually, I'm reading right now a book called Letting Go by David Hawkins. It's one of the best reads I have ever set my eyes on, because it really brings a different perspective to the type A Virgo process driven planner person that I've always been. And it's like, wow, there is actually beauty and success in the letting go approach, because you feel so much relief. You don't have pressure, you don't have anxiety, but then actually things turn out a lot better than you probably could have planned as a human. And so are
you there, Imane?
Oh, sorry. Did I lose you?
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
For a little bit. Yes.
I think my internet was like recalibrating. But I was just
you stopped at the book that you're reading. Yeah.
So Letting Go is a great book that really has given me the freedom to think that I don't have to always have something planned next, and I'm just letting it go and see where I'm supposed to end up. And that's actually really exciting to live that way now.
Yeah, that's so awesome. And, again, thank you for coming on the show. As I said before, I'm a big fan of Vocable. Definitely going to get the book, and excited to see your path and what's next for you. Definitely excited about that. But I appreciate you for taking the time to being on the series with me.
Of course. Thanks for having me. It really means a lot. And thanks for letting me share my crazy story.
It was a very good story. Awesome. All right, guys. I am Shani Sanders. This is the Girl Take No Podcast, and I will talk to you next time. Thank you for listening or watching the Girl Take No Podcast. We really hope that this episode gets you one step further in turning your passions into profits. If you like today's episode, please make sure you like, subscribe, and follow Girl Take No Podcast on all social channels. And also make sure you review the episode, as your reviews are so important to help us grow. Also, please leave us a comment, as we would love to know your thoughts and opinions on this episode, and also any other episodes that you might want to see from the Girl Take No Podcast. Until next time, we'll see you in the next episode.